October 17th, 2011, Scarborough, Toronto. The autumn evening had settled over the quiet residential street with that particular Canadian chill that makes you grateful for warm baths and warmer homes. Inside a modest two-story house, something had gone terribly wrong. At approximately 7:43 p.m., emergency dispatch received a call. The voice on the other end was breathless, panicked. The caller said his wife was in the bathtub, not breathing. He'd just returned from a jog and found her underwater. He begged them to help. The caller identified himself as Philip Grandine, 25 years old. His wife, Anna Carissa, was 29, 20 weeks pregnant, and according to Philip, unresponsive in their bathtub. Paramedics arrived within minutes. They found Carissa's body still in the tub, the water cool to the touch. Her skin had already begun to show the telltale signs of prolonged submersion. They attempted resuscitation protocols, but it was clear she had been gone for some time, far longer than the timeline Philip had suggested. The first responders moved through the house with practiced efficiency, documenting the scene. The bathroom showed no signs of struggle. No water splashed on the floor. No overturned bottles or evidence of a slip and fall. The tub itself was orderly, almost staged in its stillness. One of the paramedics, a 20-year veteran, would later testify about a detail that struck him immediately. For a drowning victim, especially one who was conscious when they went under, you'd expect to see some disturbance. Displaced bath mats, water everywhere, something knocked over. This looked peaceful. Too peaceful. A detective arrived as the body was being prepared for transport. He walked through the scene, noting the lack of emergency medication bottles, no signs of a medical episode. Nothing to explain why a healthy pregnant woman would suddenly lose consciousness in a bathtub. He asked Philip the standard preliminary questions. Philip explained he'd been out jogging, came home, found her. Simple, tragic, accidental. But then the detective asked about Carissa's health in the days leading up to her death. Philip hesitated, just for a moment, then mentioned that 3 days earlier, on October 14th, Carissa had experienced a strange episode: severe dizziness, vomiting, confusion. They'd gone to the hospital, but she'd been released after her symptoms subsided. The detective made a note: a pregnant woman with unexplained symptoms 3 days before drowning in her own bathtub. He requested the hospital records immediately. What none of them knew yet was that this wasn't an accident. It was the culmination of a carefully researched, methodically executed plan. And the evidence of that plan was sitting in plain sight, just feet away from where Philip stood, stored in the hard drive of the couple's home computer. Scarborough is part of Toronto's Eastern District, a diverse working-class area where multi-generational families often settle. Communities here tend to be tight-knit, particularly within religious and cultural groups. The Grandines were part of one such community, members of Ennerdale Baptist Church, a modest congregation where faith wasn't performance but practice. Anna Carissa Grandine, known to most as simply Carissa, had grown up in this world. Her sister, Hannah Darvin, would later describe her as the kind of person who made everyone around her feel seen and valued. She worked as an insurance underwriter, a job that suited her meticulous nature and her quiet competence. She wasn't flashy or loud. She was steady, reliable, the kind of friend you called when you needed actual help, not just sympathy. At 29, Carissa had been married to Philip for 3 years. The pregnancy had been planned, wanted. She'd been fastidious about her prenatal care, avoiding even mild over-the-counter medications out of concern for the baby. She'd already started a list of potential names, had begun browsing nursery furniture online. The night before her death, Carissa had been doing something utterly ordinary, meal planning for the week, texting with her sister about a family gathering, researching strollers. She had gone to bed thinking about the future, about the child who would arrive in just 20 more weeks, about becoming a mother. She had no idea she had already consumed her last meal. Philip Grandine had always known how to present himself. At 25, he'd already established a reputation as a thoughtful, articulate young pastor at Ennerdale Baptist Church. He wasn't the senior minister, but he was the kind of charismatic young leader that congregations invest in. Well-spoken, theologically sound. The kind of man who could quote scripture with ease and offer counsel with apparent wisdom. He and Carissa had met through the church. Their courtship had been appropriate, their wedding attended by the entire congregation. On the surface, they seemed like the ideal Christian couple, faithful, committed,
building a life centered on shared values. But surfaces lie. What the congregation didn't know, what Carissa herself hadn't known for quite some time, was that Philip had been living a double life. Behind the pastoral image, Philip had developed a compulsive relationship with online pornography. Hours of his day were consumed by explicit content. His browser history would later reveal thousands of visits to adult websites, escort services, and increasingly extreme material. And then Philip had crossed a line that would detonate his carefully constructed image. He'd begun an affair with a parishioner, someone who sat in the same pews, someone who sang the same hymns, someone who was, devastatingly, one of Carissa's close friends. When church leadership discovered the affair in early 2011, the consequences were immediate. Philip was forced to step down from his pastoral duties. The humiliation was public. The betrayal was complete. But Carissa, embodying the forgiveness her faith taught, made a decision that would ultimately cost her everything. She chose to try to salvage the marriage. Another pastor stepped in to facilitate reconciliation counseling. He established non-negotiable conditions. Philip must sever all contact with his mistress. No exceptions, no closure conversations, complete separation. Additionally, a pornography blocking software would be installed on the couple's home computer, and Carissa would control the password. She would be the gatekeeper of Philip's digital access. Philip agreed to everything. He performed contrition beautifully. He attended the counseling sessions. He made the right promises. But privately, resentment was festering. The woman he wanted was now forbidden. His secret life was now monitored, and his pregnant wife, with her passwords and her vigilance, had become an obstacle to the life he actually wanted to live. After stepping down from the church, Philip took a new position as a nurse manager at a Toronto seniors residence. It was presented as a fresh start, a chance to rebuild. What no one recognized at the time was that this job came with a dangerous advantage: unrestricted access to pharmaceuticals, including lorazepam. When investigators initially interviewed Philip on the night of Carissa's death, he was composed. Grief-stricken, certainly, but controlled. He sat in the living room of the home he'd shared with Carissa and walked detectives through his version of events with careful precision. He told them he'd gone for a jog around 6:30. It was part of his routine. He usually ran for about 45 minutes to an hour. When he left, Carissa had mentioned she was thinking about taking a bath. She'd been tired lately because of the pregnancy. When he got back, he called out to her, but she didn't answer. He went upstairs and saw the bathroom door was closed. He knocked, and when she still didn't respond, he opened it. That's when he saw her under the water. He said he pulled her out immediately and called 911. The detective asked if Carissa had any medical conditions, any history of fainting or seizures. Philip said no, nothing like that. Although, he added, 3 days ago she'd had that strange episode. She'd suddenly gotten really dizzy and started vomiting. They'd gone to the hospital, but they'd released her after a few hours. The doctors had said her vitals were fine. The detective asked if the hospital had indicated what might have caused the episode. Philip said no. They'd seemed as confused as he and Carissa were. Carissa had thought maybe it was something she ate or just pregnancy-related. The detective made a note to pull those hospital records. Then he asked a question that seemed almost procedural. Did Philip and his wife share a computer? Philip's expression didn't change, but there was the briefest pause. He said yes, they had a desktop in the home office. He asked why. The detective explained it was just routine. They'd need to examine any devices in the home as part of the investigation. Standard protocol for any unexplained death. Philip nodded slowly and said of course, whatever they needed. What Philip didn't say, what he couldn't say, was that just moments before making that 911 call, he had done something very specific on that computer. He had disabled the pornography monitoring software that Carissa controlled. The digital lock she'd placed on his behavior had been removed, while her body was still warm in the bathtub. It would take investigators several days to notice. But when they did, everything would change. The autopsy results came back on October 20th, 3 days after Carissa's death. The medical examiner's findings were unambiguous. Cause of death was drowning, but the manner of death was immediately suspicious. Carissa's toxicology report showed massive levels of lorazepam in her system. For context, a standard therapeutic dose of lorazepam for anxiety is 2 to 3 milligrams. Carissa had approximately 10 times that amount in her blood, enough to render her virtually unconscious, enough to make voluntary movement nearly impossible. And here was the critical detail. Carissa had never been prescribed lorazepam. Not by her primary care physician, not by her obstetrician, not by anyone. For a pregnant woman who wouldn't take Tylenol without consulting her doctor, the presence of a powerful benzodiazepine was medically inexplicable, unless someone had given it to her without her knowledge. The detective immediately requested Carissa's medical records from her hospital visit on October 14th. When those records arrived, they included something crucial: preserved blood samples from that visit, taken during her mysterious episode of dizziness and vomiting. The detective ordered those samples tested specifically for lorazepam. The results came back positive. Significant levels of the same drug found in her system at death. Carissa hadn't experienced a random illness 3 days before she died. She'd been drugged. It had been a test run, a calibration. And when she'd asked Philip directly, according to her mother's testimony, if he'd given her something, if he'd given her a pill, he had looked into her confused, frightened eyes and lied. The investigation shifted from accidental death to homicide, and the focus shifted entirely to Philip Grandine. While the toxicology painted a damning picture, it was the digital forensic examination that would transform suspicion into certainty. When cyber forensic analysts seized the couple's home computer, they began the painstaking process of reconstructing its usage history. What they found was a chilling timeline of premeditation. Beginning in late September 2011, approximately 3 weeks before Carissa's death, a user on the computer had begun conducting very specific searches. September 28, 2011, at 11:47 p.m., how to obtain lorazepam without prescription. September 29, 2011, at 10:32 p.m., lorazepam side effects drowsiness. October 3, 2011, at 9:15 p.m., what is a fatal dose of lorazepam? October 5th, 2011, at 10:08 p.m., lorazepam effects on pregnant women. October 11th, 2011, at 11:23 p.m., can lorazepam cause unconsciousness? The searches were methodical, research-oriented, the digital behavior of someone gathering information for a specific purpose. But here's what made the evidence absolutely devastating. These searches were interwoven, timestamp by timestamp, with searches for local escort services and explicit pornographic content. The user would research fatal doses of sedatives, then immediately pivot to adult websites, then return to pharmaceutical inquiries. The pattern was undeniable. The same person researching how to kill with lorazepam was simultaneously engaging with the sexual content and services that had caused his removal from the ministry. The same forbidden desires that had destroyed his pastoral career were being pursued in the same browsing sessions where he researched his wife's murder. Philip would later attempt to claim that Carissa herself had made these searches, suggesting she was depressed about his infidelity and researching self-medication or even suicide. But the interwoven escort searches demolished that defense entirely. Why would a devoutly religious pregnant woman researching sedatives for depression simultaneously be searching for prostitutes? The forensic timeline revealed something else. On October 17th, at 7:36 p.m., exactly 7 minutes before Philip called 911, the pornography blocking software that Carissa controlled had been manually disabled. Not just bypassed, but completely removed from the system. The user had known Carissa was already dead, had known there would be no one to question why the monitoring software was suddenly gone. It was the digital act of a man who understood his obstacle had been removed and was already preparing for his newfound freedom. The detectives brought Philip in for a second interview on October 28th, 11 days after Carissa's death. The tone was markedly different. They sat him down in an interview room and laid out the forensic findings one by one. The lorazepam in Carissa's system at death. The lorazepam in her blood from the hospital visit 3 days prior. The fact that she had never been prescribed the medication. Philip maintained his composure. He said he didn't understand. How could that be in her system? She would never take something without knowing what it was. The detective replied that was exactly their question. How did a drug she was never prescribed end up in her system? Twice. Philip said he had no idea. He asked if the hospital could have given it to her. The detective said no. They'd confirmed with her medical team that she received no sedatives during her October 14th visit. So that meant someone gave it to her at home. The detective let that statement hang in the air. He then pointed out that Philip worked as a nurse manager at a senior care facility. He had access to medications like lorazepam, didn't he? Philip hesitated, then admitted that yes, technically, but everything was logged and controlled. He would never do something like that. The detective said they were pulling his facility's pharmaceutical logs. If there were any discrepancies, they'd find them. Philip's attorney, who had accompanied him to this interview, interjected. Unless they were prepared to charge his client, they were done. But the detective wasn't finished. He slid a printed document across the table. He asked Philip to explain why someone had been researching fatal doses of lorazepam in the weeks before his wife's death. Philip glanced at the document. His jaw tightened. He suggested that Carissa had access to that computer too. If someone was searching that, maybe it was her. Maybe she was struggling more than he'd realized. The detective acknowledged it was an interesting theory. Except these searches for lorazepam fatality were made in the same browsing sessions as searches for escort services in Toronto. He asked Philip to explain that. The color drained from Philip's face. The detective pressed, could Philip explain why a pregnant woman researching sedatives would simultaneously be looking for prostitutes? His attorney stood. They were done. He told Philip not to say another word. As they gathered their things to leave, the detective added one more detail. They also knew that the pornography monitoring software on the computer, the one Carissa controlled as part of the marriage counseling conditions, had been disabled at 7:36 p.m. on October 17th. 7 minutes before Philip called 911. While his wife was dying in that bathtub, he was removing the software she used to monitor his behavior. The detective asked Philip to help him understand that timeline. Philip said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. As the investigation deepened, a fuller picture of Philip's secret life emerged. Cell phone records revealed that Philip had never actually severed contact with his mistress, despite the explicit condition of his marriage reconciliation. They had continued communicating, though he'd switched to using a separate phone that Carissa didn't know about. On the night of October 17th, during the precise window when Carissa would have been drowning in the bathtub, Philip's phone showed active communication with this woman. Not after he discovered the body. Not during the supposed shock and grief. During the actual murder. Text messages recovered from the mistress's phone painted a disturbing picture. In the days following Carissa's death, while publicly playing the devastated widower, Philip had sent messages discussing when they could finally be together and making plans for after all of this settled down. Financial records revealed another motive layer. Philip had recently made online inquiries about pension benefits for surviving spouses and had researched the financial implications of divorce versus widowhood. He'd discovered that divorcing Carissa would leave him with significant financial obligations, particularly with a child involved. But if Carissa died while they were still married, particularly before the child was born, he would face no such obligations. The pregnancy that should have been a source of joy had instead become a ticking clock. Once the baby was born, divorce would mean child support, shared custody, and permanent connection to a woman he resented. But if Carissa died before the birth, he could walk away from the marriage entirely unencumbered. Investigators also uncovered that in the week before Carissa's death, Philip had done something particularly chilling. He'd taken out a life insurance policy on Carissa. Not a large policy, just enough to avoid suspicion, but the timing was impossible to ignore. Every thread investigators pulled revealed the same pattern: premeditation, calculation, and a staggering coldness towards the woman who had chosen to forgive him. Philip Grandine was arrested on November 3, 2011, and charged with first-degree murder. The arrest sent shockwaves through Ennerdale Baptist Church and the broader Scarborough community. This was a man who had stood in the pulpit, who had counseled families, who had been trusted with spiritual guidance. The congregation split. Some members couldn't reconcile the Philip they knew, or thought they knew, with the monster described in the charges. They attended his court hearings in support, convinced there had been a terrible mistake. Others felt betrayed not just on Carissa's behalf, but on behalf of every person who had confided in him, trusted him, believed his performance of piety. Carissa's family, led by her sister Hannah, attended every court appearance. They wore photographs of Carissa pinned to their clothing. They wanted the jury to see her face, to remember that behind the forensic evidence and legal arguments was a real woman who had deserved to watch her child grow. The first trial began in early 2014, nearly 3 years after Carissa's death. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented the toxicology evidence, the hospital blood samples proving the dry run, the computer search history, the disabled monitoring software, the cell phone communications with the mistress, and testimony from Carissa's mother about her daughter asking Philip if he'd given her a pill. The defense attempted to argue that Carissa's death was either accidental, that she had somehow obtained and taken lorazepam herself, or that the evidence was circumstantial. They suggested that Carissa could have been depressed about Philip's infidelity and sought to harm herself. But the prosecution dismantled these theories systematically. Carissa's obstetrician testified that she had shown no signs of depression and had been enthusiastic about the pregnancy. Her sister testified that Carissa had been making future plans and discussing baby names just days before her death. And the interwoven search history, sedatives mixed with escort services, made it impossible to credibly claim Carissa had made those searches. The jury deliberated for 4 days. When they returned, they delivered a verdict: guilty, but not of first-degree murder, of manslaughter. The distinction was crucial and painful. First-degree murder requires proving deliberate premeditation. Manslaughter acknowledges unlawful killing, but suggests a lesser degree of planning or intent. Despite all the evidence of research and calculation, the jury had apparently struggled with the technical legal distinction. Philip was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Carissa's family was devastated. 15 years for a carefully planned murder felt like an insult to her memory. But even that incomplete justice was temporary. In 2017, Philip's defense attorneys successfully appealed the conviction. They argued that the trial judge had made a legal error by introducing a new theory of liability to the jury during deliberations, essentially giving them additional legal framework to consider after deliberations had already begun. The Ontario Court of Appeal agreed that this constituted a procedural error and ordered a new trial. But here was the crushing technicality. The new trial was legally restricted to the charge of manslaughter only. Because of double jeopardy principles in Canadian law, prosecutors could not re-pursue the first-degree murder charge. Even though the evidence clearly supported premeditation, the legal system had created a ceiling on Philip's possible accountability. Carissa's family had to endure the entire trial process again, knowing that the worst he could face was another manslaughter conviction. The second trial took place between 2019 and 2020, nearly a decade after Carissa's death. The evidence was the same. The digital trail was the same. The hospital blood samples were the same. A new jury examined the entirety of Philip's methodical plan and once again found him guilty of manslaughter. In January 2020, Superior Court Justice Faye McWatt sentenced Philip Grandine to 15 years in prison, with credit for time already served. But Justice McWatt did something unusual during sentencing. She used her platform to speak directly to the inadequacy of the legal designation Philip had received. She stated that this was a diabolical act. The evidence before the court demonstrated planning, premeditation, and a level of callousness that defied comprehension. What Philip Grandine did to Anna Carissa Grandine was closer to murder, almost murder, than what we traditionally understand as manslaughter. But the law constrained the court to sentence within the parameters of the conviction. She continued, explaining that Philip Grandine had researched how to kill his wife. He'd tested the drugs on her. He'd watched her suffer and lied to her face when she asked if he had poisoned her. He then administered a fatal dose, ensured she drowned, and removed digital evidence of his behavior while she was dying. This was not a moment of passion or an accident. This was a calculated execution. The courtroom was silent. The judge concluded by saying that Anna Carissa Grandine deserved better. She deserved better than the husband who murdered her. And frankly, she deserved better than a legal system that could not call this act what it truly was. Philip showed no emotion as the sentence was read. How does a community unlearn its trust? How do you reconcile the person who stood before you in pastoral robes, speaking words of comfort and faith, with the person who methodically researched fatal drug doses while texting his mistress? The members of Ennard Baptist Church still grapple with this question. Some have left the congregation entirely, unable to worship in a space that reminds them of Philip's deception. Others have stayed, determined not to let his evil taint the faith community Carissa loved. But perhaps the deepest cost is borne by those who almost existed. The child who would have been born in February 2012. Who would be 12 years old now? Who would have had Carissa's kind eyes and generous spirit? That child never drew breath because Philip Grandine valued his sexual gratification and his freedom more than 2 human lives. There's a particular cruelty in cases like this, not just the murder itself, but the erasure of future. Every birthday that child would have celebrated, every milestone Carissa would have witnessed, every moment of joy that was stolen, not just from them, but from everyone who would have loved them. Anna Carissa Grandine was 29 years old. She was 20 weeks pregnant. She was a devoted sister, a faithful friend, and a woman who believed in second chances. She believed her husband when he promised to change. She believed forgiveness could heal what betrayal had broken. She believed, fundamentally, in the goodness of people. That belief did not make her naive. It made her faithful. And that faith was weaponized against her by the person who should have protected it most. If you're watching this, and you recognize even a fragment of Carissa's story in your own life, if you're in a relationship that requires surveillance to feel safe, if you've ignored your intuition because someone performed the right words, if you've dismissed red flags in the name of commitment or faith, please hear this. Forgiveness does not require remaining in danger. Grace does not mean ignoring evidence. Faith should never ask you to silence the voice inside you that says something is wrong. Trust that voice. Honor it. Let it protect you in ways Carissa couldn't protect herself. If this case resonated with you, please subscribe to GA Justice Files and hit the notification bell. Share this video so Carissa's story can serve as a warning and a lesson. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts on this case, and join our community committed to learning from these tragedies rather than simply consuming them. Together, we can honor victims by refusing to let their stories be forgotten. Anna Carissa Grandine. Say her name, remember her life, and let her story be a light that helps others see the darkness before it's too late. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay safe, and never mistake someone's public image for their private character